The sky had turned an unnatural shade of green, an eerie glow that made the air feel thick and oppressive. Deshaun Carter gripped the wheel of his 18-wheeler tighter, his calloused hands steady from years on the road and a past life spent, running into burning buildings. The hum of the diesel engine was the only sound for miles until the sudden, bone-chilling wail of tornado sirens pierced the stillness. He didn't flinch. Deshaun had spent most of his life prepared for moments like this. As a firefighter in Houston, he'd stared down infernos and crawled through smoke so thick it could choke your soul. But that was a lifetime ago. Before the accident, before the grief. Now, he found solace on the road. A nomad hauling refrigerated goods across the heartland, running from memories that refused to fade. He rolled down the window slightly. The wind was picking up, tugging at the trees, sending leaves spiraling like frantic birds. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating a vast stretch of flat Oklahoma land. The radio crackled with a warning. Tornado confirmed near Pottawatomie County. Seek shelter immediately. Repeat. Tornado on the ground, Deshaun muttered. Lord have mercy, and shifted gears. He was about 6 miles east of a town called Asher, barely more than a blip on the map. He'd driven this route before. Nothing but silos, scattered trailers, rusted mailboxes, and fences leaning like old men. But he respected the land, and he respected the people who worked it. They were resilient like him. He had no idea that fate had other plans. As Deshaun topped a small hill, his headlights caught the edge of a gravel-for-him road that led into a cluster of mobile homes nestled against a line of trees. The sirens were louder now, howling like ghosts warning of the inevitable. And there it was. A trailer park. 3 or 4 homes arranged in a horseshoe, some with wind chimes jangling, wildly one with a battered American flag clinging to its pole. Most of the lights were out. Power must have gone already, but one trailer had a porch light still flickering. It blinked in and out like Morse code, like a heartbeat on the edge of failing. Deshaun slowed his rig and pulled onto the shoulder. He could hear the wind now, angry and rising, hissing across the fields. Off in the distance, maybe less than 2 miles away, a low, grinding rumble echoed. Then, like a monstrous wave, the clouds began to churn into a swirling cone. The tornado had touched down. Damn, he whispered. He looked at the trailer park again. No sign of movement. It should have been abandoned by now. The weather had been tracking this system all day. Locals should have known to seek shelter, but something told him they hadn't. He grabbed his flashlight. From the dash, stepped out of the cab and slammed the door behind him. The wind hit him like a wall. Dust stung his eyes and the air smelled like ozone and damp earth. He moved fast down the gravel drive, boots crunching, heart hammering, not from fear but from something deeper. That old firefighter instinct, like a sixth sense, was screaming. "Anybody here?" he shouted over the wind. "You gotta get out. Tornado's coming." The door to the trailer was unlocked but jammed. Deshaun leaned his shoulder against it and shoved with practiced force. It groaned and finally gave way. Inside, the air was stifling. The power was out and only faint daylight lit the cramped space. He immediately spotted them. The teenage girl was curled in a corner, rocking slightly, clutching a stuffed bear. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she didn't scream. She just stared at him. Next to her, a man in his 40s stood awkwardly, eyes glassy with panic. He held a phone, but there was no signal. In the kitchen area, an older man, maybe 70, was slumped in a chair, blood on his forehead and his right leg bent unnaturally. "Who the hell are you?" the younger man shouted. "Name's Deshaun." "Truck driver. You've got maybe 5 minutes before that twister hits," he said, moving quickly to assess the old man's condition. "He's hurt bad?" The man nodded. "Dad fell. Legs broken, I think." Deshaun turned to the girl. "She okay?" "She's my daughter, Maddie. She's got Down syndrome, scared to death." Deshaun looked at all 3 of them. "We don't have time to wait. I've seen what these things can do. You got a storm cellar?" The man shook his head. "No. This trailer's all we've got." Deshaun looked outside. The tornado was visible now, a massive black funnel devouring everything in its path, heading straight for them. He could hear trees snapping, the groan of sheet metal being torn from barns, and the deep guttural sound of nature turned into a weapon. "All right," he said, his voice calm and commanding. "We're moving. Now." Deshaun quickly scanned the area around the trailer as his mind raced. There was no time for second-guessing. He recalled spotting a narrow storm drainage culvert beneath the road when he pulled over, a shallow tunnel, meant for runoff, maybe 3 feet high but reinforced with concrete. It wouldn't be comfortable, and it sure as hell wasn't designed for 4 people, but it might hold if the twister's path wasn't a direct hit. "We've got a culvert. Under the road. It's not far, 50 yards, he told them. "It's our best shot." The father hesitated. "You sure it's safe?" "It's safer than here. This trailer's gonna fly like a soda can." He didn't wait for further debate. Deshaun picked up the girl first. "Hey, Maddie," he said gently. "I'm gonna carry you, okay? We're going to a better place." She nodded, surprisingly calm in his arms. Maybe it was his voice, deep, steady and sure. He motioned to the father. "You help your dad. I'll clear the way." The wind was roaring now, and debris started to fly. As they stepped out, Deshaun felt the pressure drop. His ears popped. That meant the tornado was dangerously close. He ran with Maddie in his arms, shielded her with his back as branches and gravel pelted him. Behind him, the father struggled with his injured father, half carrying him, gritting his teeth against the storm. Deshaun reached the culvert, set Maddie inside carefully, then turned and sprinted back to help. The older man's face was pale, pain etched deep into his brow. Deshaun wrapped an arm around him and helped pull him to the entrance. "All of you inside. Lie flat, heads down." They crawled into the narrow space, crammed together like sardines. Deshaun took the end nearest, the opening using his body to shield the others. Dirt and wind whipped around them. Somewhere above, the tornado howled, a freight train screaming through the heavens. The world became a maelstrom of noise and fury. The pressure inside the culvert grew crushing, like the air itself had weight. Dirt blew in clouds. Something heavy struck the ground above them with a deafening crash, a chunk of roof or a vehicle maybe. The girl whimpered. The older man moaned in pain. Deshaun didn't move. He lay across the others, his broad back braced against the concrete, muscles tight, jaw clenched. Every instinct in him screamed to protect. This was who he was. Not just a trucker or a man running from grief. This was Deshaun Carter, firefighter, protector, survivor. The culvert groaned and vibrated. He prayed it wouldn't cave. Outside, the tornado roared past like an angry god, furious and indiscriminate. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the wind began to die. Silence returned, broken only by the patter of light rain and the sound of things falling to earth. "Is it over?" the father asked, voice hoarse. Deshaun listened carefully. The wind was calmer, the pressure normal. He turned his head, blinking away grit. "Yeah, for now." He crawled out first, scanning the landscape. What had once been a trailer park was now rubble. Trees were down, debris scattered across the field. The trailer they just left was gone, just gone. He turned and helped each person out, one by one, careful with the old man's leg. Maddie clung to her bear, her face smudged with dust but her eyes steady. "You did good, little one," Deshaun said. The father was shaking as he looked at the destruction. "You saved our lives." Deshaun shook his head. "Just did what anyone should have done." He didn't notice the license plate half buried nearby or the briefcase wedged under a tree with a congressional seal. The storm had passed, but its scars were fresh and vivid. The sky had gone a strange yellow-gray, bruised and quiet, like the earth itself was in shock. Deshaun climbed out of the culvert first, scanning for danger. Branches and shards of metal were everywhere. What used to be the trailer park was now a chaotic field of splinters, insulation, and personal belongings strewn across the mud. He helped Maddie out gently, brushing dust from her hair. The girl was shivering but silent, clutching her bear, like it was stitched from her own soul. Her father, whose name Deshaun still didn't know, followed next, limping but able. Last came the elderly man. his face pale, lips thin, blood still staining his brow. Deshaun eased him onto a patch of relatively clear ground. "Stay put," Deshaun said firmly. "We'll get help." The father turned in slow disbelief as he took in the devastation. "It's all gone." Deshaun nodded grimly. "Yeah, but you're not." It was true. One wrong second, one delay, and they'd be buried under what used to be their home. The culvert, narrow, filthy, and forgotten, had been their salvation. Sirens wailed in the distance. First responders were finally on the way, but Deshaun didn't wait for them. He tore a strip from his undershirt, knelt by the old man, and began binding the leg above the break to stop swelling. His movements were confident, practiced. He kept his voice calm, giving the man something to focus on other than pain. The father stood beside him, eyes wide. "You said you were just a truck driver." Deshaun glanced up. "Used to be a firefighter. Guess that part don't leave you." An ambulance roared up the gravel road, skidding slightly before coming to a halt. Two EMTs jumped out, equipment in hand, quickly assessing the scene. A few local deputies pulled up behind them, radios crackling with fragmented reports. One of the EMTs, a young woman with sun-reddened cheeks, rushed toward Deshaun and the old man. "Vitals?" she asked briskly. "Conscious. Likely broken. Famer. Took a hit to the head, too. Watch for concussion." She knelt, nodded as she checked pulse and pupils. Then her eyes went wide. "Holy. Is this?" She looked closer. "Senator Avery?" The father blinked. "You know him?" She nodded, stunned. "That's U.S. Senator William Avery. He was supposed to be in Tulsa today. Media's saying he was missing, maybe dead. Helicopter. Went down hours ago in the storm system." Deshaun's brows rose. He looked at the old man, who now gave a small, tired smile despite his pain. "You're a senator?" Deshaun asked, dumbfounded. "Retiring next year," Avery said. "Took a detour to check on some family property. Got caught in the storm." "Family?" Deshaun looked at the father and girl. "My son Tom," Avery said, nodding toward the man. "And Maddie, my granddaughter." Deshaun stepped back slightly, the weight of what had happened settling deeper now. He hadn't just saved 3 lives. He'd rescued a sitting U.S. senator, a man whose face had appeared on television and campaign flyers, now battered and grounded, covered in dust like everyone else. While the EMTs stabilized Avery and began prepping a stretcher, Deshaun took a few steps back. He watched Maddie cling to her father, watched Avery grip the young EMT's hand in gratitude. The moment felt heavy with importance. Cameras would be there soon. Reporters, news vans, maybe even helicopters. But Deshaun didn't want any part of it. He turned toward his rig, which miraculously hadn't been damaged, though debris was strewn across its windshield. As he walked, he passed a toppled mailbox with the name Avery barely legible. He picked it up out of instinct and set it upright again. The wind stirred softly now, carrying the smell of wet earth and gasoline. "Sir," he turned. A deputy jogged toward him, out of breath. "Are you Deshaun Carter?" "Yeah. We've got a senator in there saying you saved his life. Media's gonna want your name." Deshaun shook his head. "No media. Just tell him someone was passing through." The deputy looked confused. "That's it?" Deshaun nodded. "That's enough." He climbed into the cab of his truck, wiped the dust from the steering wheel, and stared out over the destroyed trailer. Park one last time. Then he turned the key. By the next day, every major news network in the country ran the headline, "Senator saved by mysterious trucker in Oklahoma tornado." CNN showed aerial footage of the storm's path. Entire homes flattened. Trees snapped like matchsticks. A segment ran on Fox News detailing Senator Avery's injuries and miraculous escape. Avery himself, bruised but alive, appeared in a wheelchair outside a Tulsa hospital and gave a brief statement. "If not for the man who saved us, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I don't know who he was. He didn't stay for thanks, but he risked his life for mine, for my son, and for my granddaughter. That man is a hero." Social media exploded. Find the Trucker trended on Twitter. Journalists dug through local security, footage, scanned license plates from traffic cams, and reached out to truck stops and hospitals. No one had a name, only a description. Black male, 40s, strong build, possibly former firefighter or military. Commentators called him the Phantom Rescuer. Morning talk shows speculated he was a veteran. Conspiracy theories blossomed. Some said it was staged. Others said he was an angel. But Deshaun Carter didn't watch the news. He was already 3 states away, hauling frozen chicken toward Memphis. 2 days later, Deshaun pulled his rig into a quiet truck stop off I-40 in Arkansas. He topped off his fuel and sat down in the corner booth of the attached diner, nursing a cup of black coffee and a piece of pecan pie. He kept his hat low. His worn flannel shirt smelled of diesel and rain. The waitress called him sweetheart and asked if he needed a refill. He was content to remain a ghost. But as he sipped, an elderly man with a veteran's cap slid into the booth across from him without asking. Deshaun glanced up, puzzled. "I saw the news," the man said. "Lots of news these days," Deshaun replied cautiously. "Yours stood out. I know that face. You're the one who pulled the senator out of the storm." Deshaun stayed quiet for a moment, then, "I didn't do it for politics," the man chuckled. "Didn't figure you did. I just wanted to shake your hand." He reached across the table. Deshaun hesitated, then took it. The old man's grip was firm. "World needs more men like you," he said. "Don't let him make you feel small for wanting to stay invisible. Real heroes never need the spotlight." Deshaun gave a small smile. "Appreciate that." The man stood and left without another word. Deshaun finished his pie, tipped well, and got back in the truck. He had miles to go, and no need for applause. The road would carry him forward, as it always had, as it always would. The press conference was supposed to be a simple, heartfelt message to the nation. Senator Avery, still recovering from his injuries, addressed reporters from his hospital room in Tulsa, his voice a bit strained but clear. "The past few days have been surreal," he began, looking directly into the cameras. "I've been through storms before, literal and political, but nothing compares to the one that nearly took my life. I owe my survival to one man, a stranger, a hero, who pulled me, my son, and my granddaughter out of the wreckage without hesitation, without concern for his own safety. His name remains unknown, but that won't stop me from calling him what he is, a hero." He paused for a moment, the room silent as the weight of his words sunk in. "From this moment forward, I will make it my mission to find him, to thank him in person. Whoever you are, sir, if you're watching this, thank you." The cameras clicked as reporters scrambled to ask their questions. But despite the emotional plea, no one knew who Deshaun Carter was. The mystery only deepened. Was he truly a former firefighter or soldier, a rescuer from another place? Or was he a man who simply couldn't stay in the spotlight? Avery's team launched an official search. They reached out to local truck stops, put up flyers in nearby towns, and even sent out requests for tips on the network of trucker forums. But still, nothing. Deshaun was gone, and he wanted it that way. By the time Deshaun reached the Texas border, he could no longer ignore the media attention. The truck stops, the small-town diners, even the rest areas, they were all buzzing with stories about the Phantom Trucker. News outlets across the country now had his face plastered in local sections, and articles began to speculate about his identity. It wasn't just the usual news junkies talking anymore. It was everyone. "Who is Deshaun Carter?" the headlines asked. But they got everything wrong. One news outlet claimed he was a decorated war hero. Another suggested he was a firefighter with a tragic past. Rumors swirled that he had been awarded medals for valor. Deshaun knew that in reality, he had been a rookie firefighter for just a few years before a back injury had forced him to retire early. Another news source called him an unassuming hero with a criminal past, drawing conclusions based on his brief run-ins with the law as a young man, incidents he'd put behind him years ago. It was all nonsense. The pressure was building. People began to notice him more. A strange look from a fellow driver, a hesitant smile from a waitress. It was becoming harder to keep his head down, and it made him feel uneasy. Deshaun had always been a quiet, solitary man, comfortable in the silence of the road, far from the gaze of others. Now, with every passing mile, he could feel the weight of the world pressing on him. One evening, parked at a truck stop outside Amarillo, Deshaun received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was familiar, yet it took a moment for him to place it. "Deshaun? It's Tom Avery, Senator Avery's son. We've been trying to track you down. My father wants to meet you." Deshaun's hand tightened around the phone. "I'm not interested in any meetings." "Listen," Tom said, his tone more urgent. "This isn't about politics or fame. My father's been asking for you non-stop. He knows what you did. He just wants to talk. You saved his life." Deshaun was silent for a moment, conflicted. "I didn't do it for any of that. I know." Tom interrupted gently. "We're grateful, but he's insistent." Deshaun gripped the steering wheel harder. This wasn't what he wanted. He wasn't a hero, just a man who was in the right place at the right time. "I'll think about it," he muttered before hanging up. The next few days were filled with constant reflection. Deshaun couldn't shake the feeling that avoiding Avery was the right thing to do, that slipping back into obscurity was the only way to live. But there was a nagging sense of duty in him too. Avery was a good man, and Deshaun had saved his life. There was no escaping that fact. As much as he hated the attention, he couldn't ignore the gratitude that was offered to him, nor the kindness of a man whose life he'd changed. So, after much internal debate, Deshaun made the decision. He would meet Avery, but it would be on his own terms. No cameras, no press, just a man who needed closure. He arranged to meet Avery in a small park near the senator's home in Tulsa, away from the media circus. It was a quiet place, just a few benches, the sound of birds in the trees, and the hum of a distant city skyline. Deshaun parked his truck and got out, feeling the weight of every step as he approached Avery, who was already seated, looking contemplative. The senator looked up, his eyes soft with appreciation. "I didn't expect you to come." Deshaun nodded, choosing to stand rather than sit. "I don't do much for the spotlight." Avery chuckled. "I get it. But I just wanted to thank you. Really, thank you. You saved my family, Deshaun. You gave us something we'll never forget." Deshaun shifted uncomfortably. "You don't have to thank me. It was just luck." "No," Avery said firmly, shaking his head. "It wasn't luck. It was you. And that makes all the difference." Deshaun stood still for a moment, absorbing the weight of Avery's words. Then, after a pause, he spoke. "Just do something good with it," Deshaun said quietly, before turning away. Avery, sensing the finality in his words, watched him leave. "I'll make sure of that," he said under his breath. Over the following months, Senator Avery kept his promise. Behind closed doors, he worked with his team to make sure that Deshaun's story wasn't twisted into something for political gain. Avery quietly pushed for legislation to improve the lives of truckers, emergency responders, and veterans. He did so without ever naming Deshaun or drawing attention to him directly. Avery continued to honor the man who saved his life by making sure the right people received the help they needed, ensuring that the mysterious hero would always be remembered but never used. Meanwhile, Deshaun continued on his journey, taking the same long-haul routes, just as he always had. But something had changed. He no longer felt invisible. He knew that somewhere in the quiet, someone was doing good because of his actions, and that was enough for him. Years later, as Deshaun sat in a truck stop diner in a town he'd visited 100 times before, he found himself staring at a newspaper headline that read, "A Hero's Quiet Legacy, the Trucker Who Saved a Senator," and disappeared. He smiled softly to himself and folded the paper. He didn't need recognition, didn't need the world to know his name. What mattered to him was the fact that every time a person's life was changed by an act of kindness, his legacy grew. Not in the public eye, but in the hearts of those who remembered. The road would always call to him. And Deshaun Carter was just fine with that. He tipped his hat, finished his coffee, and drove off, the open road welcoming him back with the quiet promise of another day, another mile, and another life to touch.